The sun was setting on Eos Prime, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The colony world, nestled far from Earth but still under humanity's watchful eye, was a place of beauty and promise. Rolling green hills stretched as far as the eye could see, dotted with clusters of modern buildings and towering energy collectors that hummed softly in the evening breeze. It was peaceful here, almost too peaceful for some. But peace never lasts forever. Lieutenant Elena Reyes stood at her post inside the communications hub, staring out through the large glass window. She liked this time of day. The way the light filtered through the trees outside always made her feel calm. Her fingers tapped absent-mindedly against the console in front of her, the rhythmic sound blending with the faint hum of machinery around her. Everything seemed normal, routine, safe. But then, something changed. A sharp blip cut through the steady background noise of the comm system. Elena frowned, leaning closer to the screen embedded in her desk. At first, she thought it might just be interference space signals weren't perfect. After all, but the blip came again, louder this time. And then another followed, until the entire room buzzed with activity. Red lights began flashing along the walls, casting eerie shadows across the floor. "What is that?" muttered one of her colleagues, a wiry man named Carl, who sat 2 desks over. His voice carried a hint of panic, though he tried to mask it with curiosity. Elena didn't answer right away. Instead, she focused on the data streaming across her monitor. The readings were unlike anything she'd seen before. Massive energy signatures moving fast, heading straight for Eos Prime. Dozens of them. Maybe hundreds. Whatever they weren't human ships. "Get me command," she said sharply, snapping Carl out of his daze. He nodded quickly and scrambled to comply, his hands flying over his keyboard. Within seconds, the face of Colonel Marcus Halle appeared on the main holoscreen in the center of the room. His expression was grim, his jaw tight. "We've got incoming," Elena reported without preamble. "Multiple contacts, high speed, unknown origin. They'll be within range in less than 10 minutes. Colonel Halle didn't waste time asking questions. "Sound the alarm," he ordered. "Lock down all facilities. Prep defense grids. I want every available unit armed and ready to respond. Now." The order sent a ripple of urgency through the communications hub. Technicians sprang into action, relaying messages to different sectors of the colony. Alarms wailed across Eos Prime, shattering the tranquility of the evening. Civilians ran for cover, soldiers rushed to their posts, and automated turrets swiveled toward the horizon, scanning for targets. And then they arrived. At first, there was nothing but a faint shimmer in the sky, like heat waves rippling above asphalt. Then, suddenly, ships materialized out of nowhere. They were massive, larger than any vessel Elena had ever seen. Sleek and angular, they bristled with weapons arrays and glowing conduits that pulsed with alien energy. Their surfaces reflected the fading sunlight, making them look almost otherworldly. One by one, the ships descended, hovering ominously above the landscape. Some positioned themselves over key locations, power plants, research facilities, military bases, while others remained higher up, forming a blockade in orbit. The sheer size of the fleet was overwhelming. There must have been at least 50 ships visible from the ground, and who knew how many more lingered beyond the atmosphere. Elena felt her heart pounding in her chest. She wanted to run, to hide, to do anything but sit there and wait for whatever came next. But she couldn't, not yet. She had a job to do. "Are we getting any transmissions?" Colonel Halle asked, his voice crackling through the speakers. Elena checked her console. Sure enough, a signal was coming through, one strong enough to override all frequencies. She patched it into the holoscreen, and moments later, an image appeared. It wasn't human. The creature standing before them, if you could even call it that, was tall and imposing. Its body covered in thick, iridescent scales that shifted colors depending on the angle of the light. Its head was elongated, with no visible ears or nose, just a wide slit of a mouth filled with razor-sharp teeth. Two piercing eyes glowed faintly, boring into everyone watching as if trying to intimidate them into submission. Behind the creature stood rows of similarly alien figures, each one clad in armor that looked both advanced and menacing. Weapons hung at their sides, and their stances radiated confidence. They didn't seem worried about being outnumbered or outgunned. In fact, they looked bored. "This is Admiral Vrax Kor of the Hegemony," the creature announced, its voice deep and guttural, translated into English by some kind of universal translator. "You are now under our control. Surrender your resources, your technology, and your lives, and you will be spared. Resist, and you will be annihilated." There was a long pause after the message ended. No one spoke. No one moved. The weight of those words hung heavy in the air, suffocating, and final. Colonel Holly broke the silence. "What are our options?" he asked quietly, though Elena wasn't sure if he was talking to her or himself. She swallowed hard. "Not me," she admitted. "Their numbers. Their tech. We're outmatched." Holly nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. "Then we prepare for the worst." Outside, the alien ships began to deploy smaller craft fighters and dropships that streaked toward the surface like meteors. Explosions soon followed as the invaders targeted key infrastructure, disabling power grids and communication arrays. Panic spread like wildfire among the colonists, and even the most seasoned soldiers struggled to maintain composure amidst the chaos. Elena found herself frozen at her station. Her mind raced, trying to think of anything that might give them a fighting chance. But what could they possibly do against such overwhelming odds? And then, almost instinctively, her fingers hovered over the emergency beacon. It was a last resort, a desperate measure reserved for situations exactly like this. Pressing it would send out a distress signal, not to Earth, which was too far away to offer immediate help, but to anyone else who might be listening. Anyone willing to come to their aid. She hesitated. Who would answer? Pirates? Mercenaries? Or worse. But then she remembered the stories. Tales whispered among spacers and traders about a group of warriors so fierce, so relentless, that even mentioning their names struck fear into the hearts of enemies. The Deathworlders. Taking a deep breath, Elena pressed the button. Somewhere, deep in the void of space, the signal traveled outward, carrying with it the hopes and fears of everyone on EOS Prime. The signal raced through the cold, empty void of space, a faint pulse of energy cutting through the silence. It traveled for hours, passing by barren moons, asteroid fields, and distant stars without pause. In the vastness of the universe, it seemed almost impossible that anyone or anything would hear it. But then, against all odds, it reached its destination. Deep in an uncharted region of the galaxy, aboard a massive warship known as the Iron Fang. Admiral Cale Draven stood on the bridge, his towering frame exuding authority. His scarred face was unreadable, his piercing blue eyes scanning the holographic displays hovering before him. The Iron Fang was the flagship of the Deathworlders fleet, a coalition of warriors from planets so brutal and unforgiving that survival itself was considered a victory. These were not ordinary soldiers. They were survivors of worlds where every day was a battle, where only the strongest lived to see tomorrow. Draven himself was a legend among his people. Born on a planet called Vorthica, place where predators hunted both day and night, he had risen to become one of the most feared leaders in the galaxy. His armor bore the marks of countless battles, and his reputation was built on a foundation of blood, steel, and unrelenting determination. To his crew, he was more than just a commander. He was a symbol of their collective strength. The bridge was alive with activity. Warriors clad in mismatched armor moved between stations, their weapons strapped tightly to their sides. Some were human-like, while others looked like creatures pulled straight from nightmares. Yet despite their differences, they shared one thing in common: a love for war. For the Deathworlders, there was no greater joy than facing impossible odds and emerging victorious. And now, as the emergency beacon signal reached them, their chance had come. "Admiral," said a voice behind him. It belonged to Commander Rin Voss, one of Draven's most trusted officers. She was shorter than most of her comrades, but what she lacked in size, she made up for in ferocity. Her sharp claws gleamed under the dim red lighting of the bridge, and her feral grin hinted at the excitement bubbling within her. "We've picked up a distress call." Draven turned to face her, his expression unchanged. "Details?" "It's coming from a human colony," Voss replied, pulling up the data on a nearby holoscreen. "They're under attack by some kind of alien force. Looks like they're outmatched." She paused, tilting her head slightly. "Sounds like fun." A murmur of agreement rippled through the bridge. The Deathworlders weren't ones to shy away from a challenge, especially when it involved fighting aliens who thought themselves superior. They thrived on such encounters, relishing the opportunity to prove their dominance. Draven studied the information silently, his mind working quickly. He didn't need long to decide. Turning back to the crew, he raised his voice so everyone could hear. "Set course for the coordinates. Maximum speed." The announcement sparked cheers across the bridge. Weapons were drawn, fists were raised, and shouts of anticipation filled the air. This was what they lived for: the thrill of combat, the rush of adrenaline, the chance to carve their names into the annals of history. For the Deathworlders, every battle was a story waiting to be told. And this one promised to be unforgettable. As the Iron Fang and its accompanying fleet warped toward the besieged colony, flashbacks played out in Draven's mind. Memories of his past, of the battles he'd fought and the enemies he'd defeated, came flooding back. Each one reminded him why he led these warriors, why he pushed them to fight harder, faster, stronger. They weren't just soldiers. They were the embodiment of resilience, forged in the fires of death worlds where weakness meant extinction. Meanwhile, aboard another ship in the fleet, a young recruit named Yarrick shifted uneasily in his seat. Unlike many of his comrades, Yarrick hadn't been born on a death world. He was human, a survivor of a mining accident that had left him stranded on Vorthik during his youth. It was there that he'd caught Draven's attention, displaying a rare combination of cunning and courage that set him apart from the others. Now, as part of the Deathworlders' fleet, he trained daily to earn his place among them. Yarrick watched the countdown to arrival with a mix of excitement and dread. He knew the stories about the Deathworlders, their ferocity, their skill, their refusal to back down no matter the odds. He wanted nothing more than to live up to their standards, to prove himself worthy of standing beside them in battle. But he also knew the risks. Fighting alongside the Deathworlders meant stepping into the jaws of death itself, and not everyone walked away. Back on the Iron Fang, Commander Voss approached Draven once more. "What do you think we're walking into?" she asked, her tone casual but curious. Draven shrugged, his gaze fixed on the stars streaking past the viewport. "Doesn't matter," he said simply. "If they sent out a distress call, they're desperate. Desperate people don't care who answers as long as someone does." Voss chuckled darkly. "Let's hope they're ready for us." Hours passed, and the fleet drew closer to its destination. When the ships finally dropped out of warp, the scene that greeted them was chaos incarnate. Alien vessels loomed large in the sky, raining destruction down upon the colony below. Explosions lit up the horizon, sending plumes of smoke spiraling into the air. The ground forces of the invaders strange. Insect-like creatures, armed with advanced weaponry, swarmed across the landscape, overwhelming the human defenders at every turn. Draven wasted no time. Raising his hand, he signaled for the fleet to engage. With a roar of engines, the Deathworlders' ship surged forward, launching salvos of missiles and plasma bolts at the enemy. The sudden appearance of reinforcements caught the aliens off guard, and several of their ships exploded in brilliant bursts of light. Cheers erupted throughout the Deathworlders' fleet, though Draven remained focused. This was only the beginning. On the ground, the situation was dire. Human soldiers, vastly outnumbered and outgunned, fought valiantly but were slowly being pushed back. Many lay dead or wounded, their bodies scattered across the battlefield. Civilians huddled in makeshift shelters, praying for salvation that seemed unlikely to come. And then, the first wave of Deathworlder troops descended. Dropping from orbit in sleek assault pods, the warriors hit the ground running. Their armor clanked loudly as they charged into the fray, weapons blazing. Commander Voss led the charge, her claws slicing through alien flesh with terrifying ease. Behind her, other Deathworlders unleashed hell, their movements fluid and precise. They fought with a level of coordination and brutality that stunned both friend and foe alike. Lieutenant Elena Reyes, still holed up in the communications hub, witnessed the arrival of the Deathworlders with a mixture of awe and terror. She watched as their ships tore through the alien fleet, turning the tide of the battle in mere minutes. On the ground, their warriors carved paths of destruction through the enemy ranks, their ferocity unmatched. It was as if a storm had descended upon the battlefield, one that showed no mercy and spared no life. But even as hope began to rise, Reyes couldn't shake the feeling of unease. These newcomers were not saviors in the traditional sense. They were predators, hunters who reveled in violence. And though they fought on humanity's side, she wondered what price would have to be paid for their aid. For now, however, there was no time to dwell on such thoughts. The battle raged on, and survival was the only goal. As the Deathworlders pressed their advantage, Reyes returned to her console, determined to do whatever she could to support them. Little did she know, her role in this conflict was far from over, and that the true test of her courage was yet to come. The battlefield was a swirling maelstrom of chaos and destruction. Alien ships clashed with those of the Deathworlders in orbit, their weapons lighting up the sky like fireworks. On the ground, explosions rocked the landscape, sending plumes of dirt and smoke high into the air. The once beautiful colony of Eos Prime now resembled a war zone, its green hills scorched and its buildings reduced to rubble. Amidst the carnage, the Deathworlders fought with unmatched ferocity, their presence turning the tide of the battle, but not without cost. Commander Rin Voss moved like a blur across the battlefield, her claws flashing as she tore through enemy after enemy. Her feral grin never faded, even as alien blood splattered her armor. Behind her, other Deathworlders advanced in tight formation, their weapons barking with relentless precision. They were a force unlike anything the invaders had ever faced, pushing forward with an unyielding determination that left their opponents reeling. Lieutenant Elena Reyes watched from her position inside the communications hub, her hands trembling as she relayed updates to Colonel Hale and the remaining human forces. The arrival of the Deathworlders had given them a fighting chance, but the fight was far from over. The aliens, now identified as members of the hegemony, were regrouping, adapting to the unexpected threat. Their numbers were still overwhelming, and their technology gave them a significant edge. "They're pulling back," one of the technicians shouted, pointing at a live feed from a drone camera hovering over the battlefield. Sure enough, the insect-like creatures were retreating, falling back toward larger concentrations of their forces. It wasn't surrender, it was strategy. They were regrouping, preparing for a counterattack. Alana's stomach churned. She knew what that meant. The Deathworlders might have turned the tables temporarily, but the hegemony wasn't done yet. If anything, they were about to unleash everything they had. Colonel Hale's voice crackled over the comms. Reyes, I need you to keep us connected. Coordinate with the Deathworlders if you can. We need to hit them hard before they recover. I'll do my best, sir, Elena replied, though her voice betrayed her uncertainty. Communicating with the Deathworlders wasn't easy. They didn't use standard protocols, and their language was guttural and harsh. But she had no choice. Humanity's survival depended on it. As she worked, flashes of the battle outside continued to play out on the monitors around her. One screen showed Commander Voss leading a small squad of Deathworlders into a heavily fortified alien position. With brutal efficiency, they dismantled the defenses, taking down turrets and clearing out nests of enemies. Another screen displayed aerial footage of the orbital skirmish, where Admiral Draven's fleet engaged the hegemony ships in a deadly dance of fire and steel. The Deathworlders' vessels were smaller and less advanced, but their pilots flew with reckless abandon, weaving through enemy fire and striking critical blows. Despite their initial success, the toll of the battle was becoming clear. Several Deathworlder ships had been destroyed, their wreckage drifting lifelessly in space. On the ground, bodies littered the battlefield, not just those of the hegemony's forces, but also of the Deathworlders themselves. For every step forward, there was a price to pay. Amidst the chaos, Elena noticed something strange. A group of alien soldiers was moving toward the communications hub, their weapons trained on the building. She froze, her heart pounding in her chest. They hadn't seen her yet, but it was only a matter of time. Colonel Holly, she whispered urgently into her headset. We've got hostiles approaching the hub. Request immediate support. There was a brief pause before Holly responded. Hold your position, Lieutenant. Reinforcements are en route. But reinforcements were slow to arrive. The Deathworlders were spread thin, their forces stretched across multiple fronts. Elena realized she might be on her own, at least for now. Gripping her sidearm tightly, she slipped out of the main control room and into the shadows of the corridor. The aliens were close. She could hear their chittering voices growing louder. Her mind raced, searching for a way out. The hub was a maze of narrow hallways and locked doors, but she knew the layout better than anyone. If she could stay quiet and avoid detection, she might stand a chance. She crouched behind a stack of crates as the first wave of aliens entered the building. Their movements were methodical, sweeping each room with practiced precision. Elena held her breath, praying they wouldn't find her. But then, one of them paused, sniffing the air. Its head tilted slightly, as if sensing something or someone nearby. Before it could investigate further, a deafening roar echoed through the hallway. Elena turned just in time to see Commander Voss burst into view, her claws dripping with fresh blood. Without hesitation, she lunged at the nearest alien, tearing it apart with savage speed. The others raised their weapons, but they were too slow. Voss moved like lightning, dodging their shots and closing the distance in seconds. Within moments, the entire squad was dead. Breathing heavily, Voss glanced around the room until her piercing gaze landed on Elena. You alive? She growled, wiping alien ichor from her face. Elena nodded, still shaken. Why, yes, thank you. Voss smirked, revealing rows of sharp teeth. Don't thank me yet. We're not done here. She gestured for Elena to follow. Come on. You're coming with us. Without waiting for a response, Voss turned and sprinted back toward the exit. Elena hesitated for only a moment before following, clutching her weapon tightly. Outside, the battle raged on, but the Deathworlders seemed to be gaining ground. Their warriors fought with a level of skill and coordination that bordered on supernatural, their movements fluid and precise. Even so, the hegemony's forces showed no signs of giving up. Admiral Draven oversaw the operation from his flagship, his eyes glued to the tactical displays. The hegemony's fleet was beginning to regroup, forming a defensive perimeter around their command ship, a massive vessel bristling with weapons and shield generators. Draven knew that taking out that ship would cripple their command structure, but it wouldn't be easy. The Deathworlders' ships were fast and agile, but they lacked the firepower to penetrate the command ship's defenses. "We need to get closer," Draven muttered, his voice low but commanding. "Prep boarding parties. If we can't destroy them from the outside, we'll tear them apart from within." His words sent a ripple of excitement through the crew. Boarding actions were dangerous, but the Deathworlders thrived on danger. Within minutes, teams were assembled and briefed, ready to storm the enemy vessel. Among them was Yarick, the young human recruit. Though inexperienced compared to his comrades, he had proven himself capable in previous engagements. Now, as part of the boarding party, he prepared to face his greatest challenge yet. The plan was simple: launch a surprise assault on the command ship, disable its shields, and create an opening for the fleet to strike. But nothing about this battle had been simple so far, and Draven knew it wouldn't start now. As the boarding pods launched, the rest of the fleet intensified their attack, drawing the hegemony's attention away from the vulnerable command ship. Explosions rocked the enemy vessels, forcing them to divert resources to defend against the onslaught. Meanwhile, the pods streaked through the debris-filled void, heading straight for their target. Inside one of the pods, Yurak clenched his fists, trying to steady his breathing. Around him, his fellow warriors checked their weapons and exchanged grim smiles. None of them expected to come back alive, but that didn't matter. What mattered was the mission and the glory that came with completing it. When the pods slammed into the hull of the command ship, the real fight began. Magnetic clamps secured the pods in place, and hatches opened with a hiss. The Deathworlders poured out, their weapons blazing as they charged into the fray. The corridors of the alien ship were dark and claustrophobic, filled with the stench of oil and burnt metal. Enemy soldiers swarmed to meet them, their weapons firing wildly. Yarick followed close behind Voss, who led the charge with terrifying efficiency. Her claws slashed through alien armor like paper, leaving trails of destruction in her wake. He did his best to keep up, firing his rifle whenever he spotted an enemy. His hand shook, but his aim was true. Each shot brought him a step closer to proving himself, to earning his place among the Deathworlders. Back on the surface, Elena found herself thrust into the thick of the battle. Under Voss's orders, she accompanied a team tasked with disabling a key alien artillery emplacement. The mission was risky, requiring them to navigate through heavily guarded territory, but Elena refused to let fear paralyze her. Using her knowledge of the terrain and her quick thinking, she helped guide the team past patrols and traps, earning their respect along the way. By the time they reached the emplacement, the Deathworlders were battered but determined. Working together, they planted explosives and retreated just as the structure erupted in a fiery explosion, sending shockwaves rippling across the battlefield. The loss of the artillery weakened the hegemony's position, giving the Deathworlders and their human allies a crucial advantage. But the cost was high. As the day wore on, the bodies piled up, not just those of the enemy, but also of friends and comrades. The Deathworlders mourned their fallen in silence, their grief fueling their resolve. They had come to fight, and fight they would, until the last alien was driven from Eos Prime. The battle for Eos Prime had reached its tipping point. The air was thick with smoke and the acrid smell of burning metal, while the ground trembled under the constant barrage of explosions. The Deathworlders, though battered and bleeding, showed no signs of slowing down. Their relentless assault had pushed the hegemony's forces to the brink. But the invaders still clung to their command ship, a towering monstrosity that loomed over the battlefield like a dark shadow. Admiral Kale Draven stood on the bridge of the Iron Fang, his sharp eyes fixed on the tactical display before him. The holographic projection showed the positions of both fleets, highlighting the stubborn resilience of the hegemony's flagship. Its shields were holding strong, deflecting every shot fired by the Deathworlders' fleet. Draven knew that breaking through those defenses would require more than brute force. It would take precision, timing, and sacrifice. "We need to get inside," he said finally, his voice cutting through the tension on the bridge. "Prep a strike team. I'm leading this one." His announcement drew murmurs from the crew. No one doubted Draven's skill or bravery, but the mission was perilous even by Deathworlder standards. Boarding the enemy's command ship meant infiltrating a fortress bristling with weapons and soldiers, all while dodging traps and counterattacks. It was a suicide run, or so it seemed to anyone else. To Draven, it was simply another challenge to overcome. Commander Rinvos stepped forward, her claws gleaming in the dim red light of the bridge. "You're not going alone," she growled, her tone leaving no room for argument. "I'm coming with you." Draven glanced at her, then nodded. He didn't waste time arguing. Voss was as deadly as they came, and her presence would only increase their chances of success. Turning to the rest of the crew, he issued rapid orders. "Assemble the best warriors we've got. We move in 10 minutes. While preparations were underway, Lieutenant Elena Reyes found herself thrust into an unexpected role. After proving her worth during earlier missions, she had earned the trust of the Deathworlders. Now, Admiral Draven himself approached her with a task. "Lieutenant," he said, his deep voice calm but firm, "you're coming with us." Elena blinked, caught off guard. "Me? Why?" "You know this planet better than anyone," Draven explained. "And you understand human tech. We might need someone who can think like the enemy and like us." His piercing gaze locked onto hers. "Can you handle it?" She hesitated for only a moment before nodding. "Yes, sir." 10 minutes later, the strike team gathered in the hangar bay. Alongside Draven and Voss were a handful of elite warriors, each one chosen for their unique skills. There was Yorick, the young recruit whose determination had earned him a spot despite his relative inexperience. There was Torka, a hulking brute with skin like stone and fists that could crush steel. And there was Sierra, a sniper whose aim was unmatched, her rifle slung across her back as she checked her gear. Elena stood among them, feeling small and out of place. These were warriors born and bred for battle, their bodies honed to perfection through years of survival on Deathworlds. She was just a communications officer, unused to combat and far from home. But she swallowed her fear, reminding herself why she was here to protect her people, no matter the cost. The boarding pods launched with a roar, hurtling toward the hegemony's command ship. As they closed the distance, the enemy opened fire, sending streaks of energy slicing through space. One pod exploded mid-flight, taking several warriors with it. The rest pressed on, undeterred by the loss. When the remaining pods slammed into the hull of the command ship, magnetic clamps secured them in place. Hatches opened with a hiss, and the strike team poured out, weapons blazing. The corridors of the alien vessel were dark and labyrinthine, filled with the hum of machinery and the stench of oil. Enemy soldiers swarmed to meet them, their weapons firing wildly. Draven led the charge, his massive frame cutting through the chaos like a blade. He wielded a plasma axe with devastating efficiency, cleaving through alien armor as if it were paper. Behind him, Voss moved like a ghost, her claws flashing as she tore through enemies with feral speed. The rest of the team followed, their movements fluid and coordinated. Elena stayed close to the group, her heart pounding in her chest. She fired her weapon whenever she spotted an enemy, her shots surprisingly accurate despite her nerves. More than once, she ducked behind cover just in time to avoid being hit. Each step deeper into the ship brought new dangers, traps, ambushes, and automated turrets, but the team pushed forward, driven by sheer willpower. "Keep moving." Draven shouted as they reached a large door marked with alien symbols. Elena recognized the markings from intercepted transmissions. It was the entrance to the bridge. Beyond it lay Admiral Vraxkor, the leader of the hegemony's forces. Torka stepped forward, planting his massive hands on the door. With a grunt of effort, he ripped it open, revealing a chamber bathed in eerie green light. Inside, rows of alien consoles lined the walls, manned by technicians who scrambled to respond to the sudden intrusion. At the center of the room stood Admiral Vraxkor himself, flanked by a dozen heavily armed guards. Vraxkor was even more imposing up close. His iridescent scales shimmered in the low light, and his glowing eyes burned with cold fury. He barked an order in his guttural language, and the guards raised their weapons, opening fire without hesitation. The strike team dove for cover as bolts of energy ricocheted off the walls. Draven returned fire, his plasma axe carving through two guards before they could react. Voss leapt into the fray, her claws slashing left and right as she carved a path toward Vraxkor. Yurek and the others provided covering fire, their weapons roaring as they picked off enemies one by one. Elena crouched behind a console, clutching her sidearm tightly. Her mind raced, searching for a way to contribute. Then she noticed something, a control panel near the edge of the room. It was marked with familiar symbols, one she recognized from studying alien technology. If she could disable the ship's shields. Taking a deep breath, she sprinted toward the panel, weaving between bursts of enemy fire. Bullets whizzed past her head, but she didn't stop. Reaching the console, she dropped to her knees and began working furiously, her fingers flying over the keys as she deciphered the alien code. "Hurry up!" Voss shouted, her voice strained as she fought off multiple attackers at once. "I'm trying," Elena replied, sweat dripping down her face. The code was complex, designed to resist tampering, but she refused to give up. Finally, with a triumphant cry, she hit the right sequence. The lights in the room flickered, and a loud alarm blared overhead. "She's done it!" Draven roared, sensing the shift in momentum. Without their shields, the command ship was vulnerable, and the Deathworlders' fleet wasted no time capitalizing on the opportunity. Outside, the Iron Fang unleashed a barrage of missiles, targeting the weakened hull of the command ship. Explosions rocked the vessel, sending shockwaves rippling through its interior. The bridge shook violently, throwing everyone off balance. Alien technicians screamed as consoles sparked and exploded, engulfing the room in chaos. Vraxkor snarled, abandoning his post to confront the intruders directly. Drawing a sleek energy blade, he lunged at Draven, his movements swift and precise. The two leaders clashed, their weapons sparking as they exchanged blows. Draven matched Vraxkor blow for blow, his strength and skill equal to the alien admiral's cunning ferocity. But Vraxkor wasn't alone. His guards regrouped, focusing their fire on the strike team. Torka took a hit to the shoulder, grunting in pain but refusing to fall. Sira used a distraction to line up a perfect shot, taking out two guards with a single bullet. Voss fought like a whirlwind, her claws tearing through enemies with savage efficiency. Amidst the chaos, Elena spotted her chance. Grabbing a fallen alien weapon, she aimed carefully and fired, striking Vraxkor's weapon arm. The alien admiral roared in pain, dropping his blade. Before he could recover, Draven seized the moment, driving his plasma axe into Vraxkor's chest. The alien leader staggered, his glowing eyes dimming as life drained from his body. With a final, defiant snarl, he collapsed to the floor, dead. The room fell silent, except for the distant rumble of explosions. The hegemony's forces, now leaderless and demoralized, began to retreat. Across the battlefield, their ships broke formation, fleeing into the void. The Deathworlders pressed their advantage, driving the invaders away from Eos Prime entirely. Back on the surface, The surviving colonists emerged from hiding, their faces etched with awe and gratitude. The Deathworlders had saved them, but at great cost. Bodies littered the battlefield, both human and alien alike. Smoke hung heavy in the air, and the scars of war marred the once beautiful landscape dot as the dust settled. Elena stood beside Draven, watching as the last of the hegemony's ships disappeared into the stars. Her hands trembled, not from fear but from exhaustion. She had faced her darkest hour and come out the other side, not unscathed, but stronger. Draven turned to her, his expression unreadable. "You did well, Lieutenant," he said simply. "Not bad for a human." Elena managed a weak smile. "Thank you." "For everything?" Draven nodded, then turned his gaze to the horizon. The battle was won, but the war was far from over. Somewhere out there, new threats waited, unaware that their time would come to face the wrath of the Deathworlders. For now, though, there was peace and a hard-earned victory to savor. The sun rose over Eos Prime, casting golden light over the battered colony. It was a new day, a chance to rebuild and recover. And though the Deathworlders would soon vanish into the stars, their legend would live on, etched forever into the hearts of those they had saved. The sun rose over Eos Prime, painting the sky in hues of orange and gold. The colony was battered and bruised, its once pristine landscape scarred by craters, blackened ruins, and the remnants of war. Smoke still curled lazily into the air from smoldering wreckage, and the silence that followed the battle felt almost unnatural. Yet, amidst the destruction, there was a sense of relief, a fragile hope that life could begin again. Lieutenant Elena Reyes stood at the edge of what had once been the main plaza, her arms wrapped tightly around herself as she surveyed the damage. The faces of survivors were etched with exhaustion, their eyes hollow but alive with gratitude. Some wandered aimlessly, searching for loved ones or salvaging what little remained of their homes. Others worked tirelessly to tend to the wounded, their hands stained with dirt and blood. It was a scene both heartbreaking and inspiring, a testament to humanity's resilience nearby. Admiral Kale Draven and his warriors moved among the colonists, their presence both awe-inspiring and unsettling. The Deathworlders weren't gentle liberators. They were predators who thrived on conflict. Their armor bore the marks of battle, dented and scorched, and their weapons remained strapped to their sides, ready for action even in victory. They spoke little, their expressions unreadable, but their actions spoke volumes. They helped move debris, carried supplies, and offered protection where needed. For all their ferocity, they seemed oddly respectful, not out of kindness, but perhaps because they understood the cost of survival better than anyone. Elena watched as Commander Rinvos knelt beside a young boy who clutched a broken toy in trembling hands. She said nothing, simply placing a clawed hand on his shoulder before standing and moving on. The gesture was small, almost imperceptible, but it left an impression. Even monsters could show compassion when the moment called for it. Colonel Marcus Hawley approached Elena, his uniform torn and streaked with soot. His usual stern demeanor had softened slightly, replaced by something resembling weariness. "We owe them everything," he said quietly, nodding toward the Deathworlders. "But I can't help feeling uneasy." Elena nodded. "I know what you mean. They saved us, but they're not exactly comforting." Hawley sighed, rubbing his temples. "Still, we couldn't have done this without them. Whatever drives them, whatever they are, we'll never forget this day." As the morning wore on, the Deathworlders began to withdraw. One by one, their ships descended from orbit, landing near the outskirts of the colony. Warriors boarded in silence, their movements efficient and deliberate. There were no speeches, no grand farewells. To the Deathworlders, this was just another mission completed, an entry in their long history of battles fought and won. Admiral Draven lingered behind, standing atop a low hill overlooking the settlement. His gaze swept across the horizon, taking in the devastation and the faint signs of rebuilding. He didn't look triumphant, only thoughtful. Elena hesitated for a moment before approaching him, unsure if she should interrupt. But something inside her urged her forward. "Admiral," she said softly, stopping a few paces away. Draven turned to face her, his piercing blue eyes meeting hers. "Lieutenant," he replied, his voice steady and calm. "I wanted to thank you," Elena continued, her words stumbling slightly. "You didn't have to come. You didn't have to fight for us. But you did. And because of that, we're alive." Drayden studied her for a moment, then nodded. "War never truly ends," he said simply. "There will always be those who seek power, who see weakness as an opportunity. Remember this day. Learn from it. Be ready." His words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Elena swallowed hard, nodding slowly. "We will." Without another word, Draven turned and walked toward his ship. As he reached the ramp, he paused briefly, glancing back at the colony. Then, with a final nod, he disappeared inside. Moments later, the ship's engines roared to life, lifting off the ground and ascending into the sky. The rest of the fleet followed, disappearing into the void like wraiths vanishing into shadow. For a long time after they were gone, Elena stood there, staring at the empty space where their ships had been. She felt a strange mix of emotions, gratitude, admiration, and a lingering unease. The Deathworlders had saved EOS Prime, but their legend would cast a long shadow over the galaxy. Stories of their arrival would spread, tales of their ferocity and skill passed down through generations. Some would fear them, others would revere them, but none would forget them. Back in the colony, life slowly began to return to some semblance of normalcy. Survivors worked together to clear rubble, repair damaged infrastructure, and care for the injured. Kunohal coordinated efforts to restore order, his voice firm but reassuring as he addressed the people. "We faced the worst and survived," he told them. "Now, it's time to rebuild. Together." Elena threw herself into the work, finding solace in the physical labor. Each task stacking supplies, clearing debris, tending to the wounded helped dull the ache in her chest. Yet, her mind often drifted back to the battle, replaying moments that had changed her forever. She thought about the Deathworlders, about their unrelenting strength and their willingness to fight against impossible odds. And she thought about herself, about how far she had come since that first moment of panic in the communications hub. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Elena found herself sitting alone on a pile of rubble, gazing up at the stars. The sky was vast and endless, dotted with pinpricks of light that seemed impossibly distant. Somewhere out there, the Deathworlders roamed, seeking new battles and new challenges. She wondered if they ever stopped to look at the stars, if they ever felt the same sense of wonder, or if they saw only opportunities for war. A soft voice interrupted her thoughts. "Mind if I join you?" She turned to see Yarek, the young recruit who had fought alongside the strike team. His armor was scuffed, and his face bore fresh scars, but his eyes shone with quiet determination. Elena smiled faintly and gestured for him to sit. "You did good out there," she said after a moment. "I heard you held your own." Yarek shrugged modestly. "Just doing my part. Trying to prove myself, you know? Fighting with them, it changes you. Makes you want to be better." Elena nodded, understanding completely. "They're something else, aren't they?" "That's one way to put it," Yarek said with a chuckle. "I don't think I'll ever stop being amazed by them. Or scared of them. They're not human," Elena mused. "But maybe that's why they're so strong. They don't hesitate. They don't doubt. They just fight and win," Yarek added. "Most of the time, anyway." The two fell silent, watching the stars together. Neither spoke of the future or the uncertainty it held. Instead, they let the quiet settle over them, finding comfort in each other's company. Days turned into weeks, and the colony began to heal. Buildings were rebuilt, crops replanted, and lives pieced back together. The scars of the battle remained, both visible and invisible, but they served as reminders rather than burdens. The people of EOS Prime had faced annihilation and emerged victorious, not alone, but with allies who defied explanation. And somewhere, deep in the darkness of space, the Deathworlders' fleet sailed onward. Their next destination was unknown, their next battle unwritten. But one thing was certain. Wherever they went, their legend would precede them. The galaxy had grown more dangerous and more fascinating with their arrival. And though peace might reign for a time, the universe knew that when the call came again, the Deathworlders would answer Dot as Elena lay in bed that night. Staring at the ceiling, she felt a spark of something unfamiliar yet undeniable. It wasn't fear or sorrow, but a quiet resolve. The Deathworlders had shown her what it meant to fight, not just with weapons, but with heart and spirit. And though she hoped never to face such horrors again, she knew she would carry their example with her always Dot in the end. The story of EOS Prime became more than just a tale of survival. It was a reminder that even in the darkest moments, help could come from the most unexpected places. That courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the willingness to act despite it. And that sometimes, the line between savior and destroyer was thinner than anyone dared to admit. Far above, the stars twinkled silently, indifferent to the struggles of those below. But somewhere among them, a fleet of warriors prepared for their next journey, ready to carve their names into the annals of history once more.